So Bricks Builder recently released their version 1.5, and in that they added one of the features that I was really needing for my website, which was the ability to go out and use conditional logic to show and hide different elements on the page based on conditions. So for example, here on my website, if we scroll to the bottom here, you can see that I have this row here where people can get my WordPress toolkit, and when they click on this, they land on my opt-in page where they can then click to opt in to get this, right? So it's like a lead magnet. So if we go back to the home page, I want to show this row here at the bottom in my footer on every page of my website, except for specific post types. So an obvious one would be, I'm showing it here so people can opt in, but when you click to go to that opt-in page, I don't want to show that at the bottom of this opt-in here. So this is actually a custom post type that the WooFunnels plugin registers and uses to do its magic and allow you to build opt-in pages. So if I right click and go and inspect element here, you can see this is a single, and then this is the post type for the opt-in page. So what I need to do for the logic on my website is I want to show this on every page of my website except for this opt-in page post type. And there's a couple of different post types throughout my website that I need to exclude it from as well. I don't want to output this on my WooCommerce checkout page, my cart page. I don't want to output this on some other pages on my website. So there was an old way that you could manage to do conditional logic using Bricks Builder prior to 1.5. So if I have a look here, this is my staging website, and this is how I was doing it previously. So I would add in a code block here, and then I would add in my PHP. So based on these conditions, I would then echo this short code, and this short code, you can see it's a Bricks template. So if I go here under Bricks and templates, because every template and section and row that you save in Bricks Builder has a short code that you can use to output that in your page wherever you want. So if we go down, I just went, here it is there. Again, I'll edit with Bricks just to show you that this is in fact that one there. So I'm going to open it up. So here it is there. So that's there. So all I was doing here in this code block is adding my conditionals, and then if they're met, then I would echo the short code, which would in turn output this row. So that's how I was showing and hiding that row based on post types. But now in Bricks 1.5, the latest version that was released about a week ago, you don't have to go and do this. So throughout this video, I'm going to refer to this as the old method, and then the new method is going to be the built-in ability that Bricks 1.5 has introduced to us. So here's a sneak preview of how it works and what we're going to go through in this video here. So you can see that Bricks Builder has introduced a new filter for us. So add filter, Bricks element render, and then at a very basic level, how this works is that in this filter, if the element is the element that we're trying to target based on its ID, we set up our conditionals, and if we don't want to output it, we return false, else we will return true, and that gets output on the page. If this doesn't make sense, this is why I'm making this video, because it was a little bit confusing to me, and I just want to show you that it's not actually that hard to do. This code here, I'm going to give you all the code, I'm going to run you through it. We're actually, throughout this video, we're going to take this old version of my website, so the old method, and we're going to convert it over to using the new method here. And in doing so, you're going to learn a lot about this new feature here. Now, if you want access to all the code and you want to follow along, on my website here, Bricks Builder Conditional Logic, I've wrote an entire blog post dedicated to here. And if you go through here, I've labeled it as such as well. So the old method, if we go here and have a look, this is the old method that I just discussed. And then we're going to have the new method, which is that PHP code. And again, all the code, the PHP code that you're going to need here is on the page here for you to copy and paste. So I'm going to link to this blog post in the description below under this video. And while we're here on this page, the next few videos that I'm going to be releasing over the next, couple of days, I'm going to do one on how I built this table of content. So if you like how this works, I'm going to be doing a video on how to do that. And then also this reading progress bar at the top where people scroll down your page, and then it sort of just goes to show how much of your blog post is left for the reader. I'm also going to do a video on how I set that up in Bricks as well. So if that's sort of something that would interest you, definitely subscribe so you don't miss out on those videos. So let's get into today's video and have a look at how I went and set it up using this new conditional logic feature in Bricks 1.5. So here we are on my staging website, and if we go to the bottom of the website, this is that row that we're going to be showing and hiding based on specific post types. So right now, this is my homepage, and we're on a staging website for now, just for this tutorial. And so I have it on the homepage here. If we go to my blog page, which is here, and then we scroll to the bottom, I have it showing here. But if I click up here, so get WP toolkit, you can see that on this opt-in page, I'm not outputting it at the bottom here. And if I click get the toolkit, that's where the opt-in form would show there. And if I right click click here and go inspect element, you can see that this is a post type and this is the post type name. So I want to output that row, which is this one here. I want to output it on all the pages on my website, except for when the post type equals my opt-in post type. So that'd be one example of where I want to exclude outputting it. And this is conditional logic. So this is currently set up using the old way that I was doing it using Bricks 1.4 and below. So let's look at how this is currently set up. So if I go into my dashboard and then let's go to Bricks and we'll go to templates and then let's go down to rows. So rows subscribe. So if I go edit with Brick and that's going to load. So here's that section here. So what I was doing to conditionally output this is if we go back to templates, you can see up here that under Bricks and templates shortcode, you can output every template that you create, like this section here, using this shortcode here. So what I did is I just copied it from here. So copied the shortcode to output this template here in Bricks. And then I went to my footer, which is here. So I'll click edit with Bricks and that's going to load. And then I added a code block up here and then I did some PHP. So if it's a singular page post, a custom post type in my website, another custom post type, or it's my home page, it's a search page, taxonomy, it's my blog, home, archive. So if these conditions are met, then I output the shortcode for that Bricks template. So this here, 62315. If I go back here, that is this row for the subscribe. It's going to be this one here. If I copy that and just put it up here quickly for you, 62315, 62315. So that's how I was sort of hacking together a little bit of conditional logic. So that works. There's no reason why you can't do that. And I could just leave this as it is right now and it would just work how I need it to work. But this new PHP filter, it just allows me to be a little bit more flexible and manage the conditional logic for all the modules throughout my website in the one interface. So that's why we're going to go ahead and remove this and then update this to the new system. So let's go ahead and delete this here and then recreate this using this new PHP filter introduced in Bricks 1.5. So I'm going to go ahead and right click and I'm going to go delete and I'm going to save that. So now that's saved. And then if we go back to the front end of our website, so I'll go up here and then go there and then go to the home page and scroll down. And now you can see it's not outputting on our website. So the next thing that we need to do is go back to our templates and I'm just going to open up that row template again. And I'm going to open up the footer template, which is here. And then here is the row. So we're going to copy this row. So we're going to go down here and go to copy. And then I'm going to go and edit my footer template and we're going to paste that. And then I'm just going to move that above the footer. And now this section is above our footer and that's going to be outputting on every page. So if I save this and we go back to our home page, if I just refresh the page now, you'll see that that is showing now above our footer. But if we go and have a look at our opt-in page up here, you can see now it's showing on our opt-in page. So back on our footer template, we have this showing now, but it's showing throughout our whole entire website. Now we're going to use a little bit of PHP that is going to not render this or not output this section based on some conditions that we set up. Let's go ahead and go back to our dashboard. Now I use a plugin called WPCodeBox to add all my custom CSS, JavaScript, all my PHP snippets. So if I go click here, WPCodeBox, inside all of these folders, here are all my snippets. So if I go to like random snippets here, you can see here's some CSS, JavaScript. So everything to do with my website, shortcodes that I create, anything like that, I create using this plugin here. Definitely recommend checking it out. They have 20% off currently. So I'm going to leave a link to that in the description below under this video. And it's also in the blog post as well. But I definitely recommend if you're writing in your functions.php file and you're finding it that it's getting quite long and hard to manage, this is definitely a really, really good plugin. And I definitely recommend checking it out. It's going to make your life a lot easier to maintain your website. I write all my custom code now here in WPCodeBox. You can do so much in here, like write a JavaScript file like this, and then you can make sure that it renders as an external JavaScript file. So it actually saves as it's a separate file that is enqueued into WordPress. You can open this condition builder and you can set where you want this to show. So things like that, it's really useful. But let's go ahead and we're going to add a new snippet and I'll just call this Bricks PHP Filter for conditional logic or render, whatever you want to call it, doesn't really matter. And again, if you're not using WPCodeBox, you would just add this into your functions.php file for your theme or child theme. And I have this setting here in WPCodeBox. I'm just going to run this code on the front end. So let's go ahead and save that. And now we need to go and add our filter into here. So I'm going to go back to the blog post, and then in the table of contents, we're going to go to the new method. And then if we go down a little bit, we're going to get our first little bit of PHP code, which is here. So we'll just copy this code here, and then we'll paste it into our snippet here. Now, this is actually taken from the Bricks knowledge base. So this is an example that they give. So I didn't write this, but it's a good way for us to understand how Bricks works with this filter. So if we have a look at the example code here, it says in the comment here, render the element with the ID this if the user is logged in. And then it says if the element's ID equals this, return is user logged in. Now, when I first read this, again, I'm not a hardcore developer, so this went a little bit over my head, but I promise you it's pretty easy to do when you understand a couple of things. So the first thing that I didn't understand is that I didn't know what render was. Like, what is render? Render is a true or false, and by default, it's true. Now, this filter, every element on the page, when Bricks is rendering the page, like your header, your footer, this row here, this section here, this here, every time it's rendering everything on the page, it goes to this filter here and it checks the code. And if there's anything that says return false, like this, return false, then it will hide that element. Otherwise, it will show that element. So the first thing I want to point out here is by default, render is true. Bricks wants to, by default, output every single element on the page. So the reason that you're using this filter is to specify under what conditions you want to not output elements. So where you want to return false. So if we had a look what's going on here in this example, when this page loads, let's just say this page tries to render, it's going to go to the header, the footer, every single item in Bricks. And it's going to go if the element ID equals this. So when it tries to do the header, it's going to go, does the header's element ID equals this? If it doesn't, then it's not going to enter here, and then it's going to go to here and return render. And by default, render equals true. So render equals true. And what true means is output it on the page. Show that module, show that element on the page. So again, by default, everything comes into here and it's true, and you have the chance to target an element and return false, which means hide that element based on conditions. So that's the first thing I want to point out. You're trying to return false, but by default, everything returns true. And this runs for every single element on the Bricks page. So what I want to do, I want to take this back to the demo code. So we're going to undo all the changes that I did, and we're going to look at what this means here. So again, by default, it's going to go to an element and then render equals true because by default, it wants to output that element. And then we have a chance to set it as false, which means don't output it. So what is this doing here? Returned is user logged in. So what this is a WordPress function. And if I'm logged into WordPress or somebody's logged into WordPress, this function is user logged in will return true, or it returns false if the user's logged out. So if you have a look at what this code is doing here in the docs, it's saying render the element with this ID here. So if the element ID equals this, render that element if the user is logged in. So if we have a look here, if the element ID equals this, so again, as it's going through all these elements and it's cycling through trying to render this page, and it gets to maybe our header, and our header has this ID here. And again, I'll show you in a second, but you get the ID from over here. See, when you click on something and it says BRXE hyphen, and then it has 6 letters, that's the ID. So let's just say it's cycling through all the elements on our page, and it goes, if the element ID equals this, and that's our header. Return is user logged in. So let's just say we're logged out of WordPress and it's cycling through and it goes, that's our header. It has the ID of our header, but we're logged out of WordPress. So is the user logged into WordPress? False. So it would cycle through and go, when it gets to our header, don't output the header. That's basically what this is saying here for a logged out user. Now, if we go to the flip side and say that we're logged into WordPress, Bricks is going to cycle through all the elements on our page and then it's going to get to our header header, which has the ID of this. Again, this is an example, but it gets to our header and goes, it's got this ID, return is user logged in. We're logged into WordPress, so this returns true. And so Bricks will output this because true equals output. So returning an element as true outputs it on the page, which again is the default functionality of Bricks. It wants to output everything by default. But if you don't want to output something, you return false. Okay, so that is the main thing that we need to understand for this particular function. But what I want to do now is just go back to our example here, and we're going to keep continuing here, and we're going to output this row here based on specific conditions. So let's go back here. And the first thing that we need to do is get the ID of that row. So coming back to here, if I click on my section, like I said previously, it's this 6-digit letter here. So you can't actually click or edit to get it. So you could remember what it is, but you can make mistakes that way. So I just like to right click and go inspect. And then under here, I'll just copy this 6-letter code here, and then I'll go back here, and then I'll paste it there. And I'm just going to get rid of this, this comment there just so it doesn't confuse us. So now I'm targeting this section here with my code. So add filter Bricks render. So as it's cycling through all the elements that are going to build up my page inside Bricks Builder, when it gets to if element ID equals this, okay, to be true, when it gets to this section here, then we can do some code here to show or hide it. So again, by default, render is true. So even if we didn't do anything here, it's going to go, if the element is here, it's going to do nothing, and then it's going to return render, and by render is true. So if we activate this and save, because we haven't returned false anywhere here for this ID and render is true by default, this isn't really doing anything. It's just still going to show the element with this ID here, which is this section, on every single page. So if I go back to staging and I go down, it's over here. If I go to my opt-in form post type, it's at the bottom. It's everywhere on my website. So let's go ahead and add some conditions here. So now that we're targeting this element here by its ID, let's go into here and go if, and I'm going to do this like that. So just an easy example, is front page like that. Well, let's make it, it's not the front page. So if it's not the home page on our website, let's go ahead and return false. So let's go ahead and save that. Okay, so if we're cycling through building our page in Bricks and we get to this ID here, if it's not the home page on our website, which is front page, then we're going to hide this element. So we're going to return false. False meaning let's not output that element. So if we go back to the front end of our website and refresh the home page and scroll down, it's showing there. But if we go to any other page on our website and go to the bottom, it's not outputting there. And if we go to another page, again, scroll down the bottom, it's not outputting there. Our opt-in page, if I refresh here, it's not outputting there. Now, if we go back to here and we reverse that and click save, now we're saying this element here, let's add some comments here. So this equals our WP toolkit section above our footer, which coming back to here, that is this here. I'm asking people to opt in to get my toolkit. It's always good to add these notes, especially with these random IDs. So if we get to that section and it's the front page, we're going to return false. False meaning don't output this row. So if we go back to our home page and refresh and go down to the bottom, it's not outputting there. But if we go back to every other page and refresh here, we can see it's outputting here on our blog. Back here on our opt-in page, if we refresh, it's showing here. So now we've done the inverse and we're outputting it on every page except our front page. So let's go back and go down to the next bit of code in this blog post that I wrote, which is here. And then let's go ahead and copy this. So we'll copy that and go back here. And I'm just going to overwrite this quickly. And we're going to go through what this is doing in a second. So now Bricks is going through and building our page and cycling through all the different elements, and render is true. So it's trying to output them all. And then it gets to our element for the WP toolkit section where the ID matches this. If it's not any of these, then hide the output of this row. So return equals false, render equals false. Now, a different way that we could approach this is as follows. Let's get rid of this. And now let's set our post types to exclude. And then if this element ID is none of these post types, then we will return true, else we return false. I'm going to go back to my opt-in page here. Okay, if I right click and go inspect element, right, and we just get this post type from there, and we go back here. So if it's an opt-in page, we're going to return false. Else, everywhere on our website is going to be true. So let's click save here, and then let's go back here. So I'm going to get rid of this. Now, if we go down and refresh this should hide. So we'll refresh, and now that is hidden. And now if we go to our homepage and refresh here, now you can see it's outputting there. So looking at our code, it's building the page, everything's trying to output render is true. It gets to our ID for our toolkit, and then it says if it is an opt-in page, don't output it, return false, output is false, render is false, don't output it. Otherwise, go ahead and show it on the front end. And we could keep adding post types here in conditions. So we could go, so singular, I'll just get another WooFunnels post type. Again, if you don't know what WooFunnels is, I definitely recommend watching some of the videos on my YouTube channel. I've been covering it for quite a few videos now. It's a really good plugin to build sales funnels. But let's go to the toolkit. Right, so if we have a look at these 2 steps in the funnel, I have my opt-in page, which we've been looking at. And when people complete this page here, they get redirected to the next step, which is the check your email here. Okay, and I don't really want to put it here because they've just put in their email. So let's go ahead and exclude this. So this is actually a second type of post type that WooFunnels does. So if we right click and go inspect element, we can see it's this post type here. So we have the opt-in page post type, and then we have the opt-in thank you page post type. So let's get that there. Go back to our code here and we'll paste that there and save. And then we'll go back to here, and then I'm just going to refresh the page here. Oh, and we need to make this an or, obviously. Save. So if it's this or that, we're not going to output it. Let's, again, I'll save it. We'll go back to here and I'll refresh the thank you page, and now that is hidden there. So just to recap this, because it's really important to understand the reason that we're doing this is that, again, render is true by default, and we're trying to look for any circumstances where we want to return false and not output this element. Otherwise, we output everything by default. Again, Bricks wants to render everything by default. So if you approach this where you're just writing, you're trying to target an element, trying to set up your conditions, and then return false, it just makes this a lot simpler to follow and manage and understand, what's going on here. Now, if we go back to the blog post and the table of contents, I did a couple of tips down here that I want to run through before we wrap up this video that are going to be quite helpful, I think. So the first couple that we've covered already, so I'm not going to go into that again. You can read the blog post. It goes into a bit more detail there. But what I would do is go to this last bit here, and it's the difference between the ID and the CSS ID. So if we have a look at this code here, and again, this was taken from the Bricks documentation, the knowledge base, they give it as example code. You can see that we have a new way to target an element, which is element settings CSS ID. So it's not element ID, it's element settings CSS ID. So I want to show you what the difference between this and what we were doing previously is, because it might save you a little bit of headache. So if we go back and go to edit our footer template and we have a look at our section here, by default, this is how it's output. Bricks just generated this ID here, this 6-letter ID. But if we go ahead and edit this, so we go edit and we write our own, so I might go toolkit like that and I'll press save. If we have a look what's happened here, now my custom ID is showing there. So let's click save, and now that's updated. But if we go to the front end of our website or even the opt-in page and refresh here, you can see that that's still not outputting that row there. So if we go back here, our code is looking for the element with the ID of this. But if we go back to our footer template, this actually has this ID now. So what I thought when I first looked at this is like, this should be false because this doesn't match anymore. And this being false, render should be true because it doesn't get affected anywhere here, and render is true by default. It should output it. But what's happening here in Bricks, if we go back to our brick builder, which is here, is having a look here. When you add an ID here, if you go down to style and then you go down to CSS and we scroll down a bit, we can see the CSS ID is WP Toolkit. So adding a custom thing up here where you add a custom ID, that's adding what is called the CSS ID. And again, that is put down there. And if we go to the front end of our website, so let's just say our homepage, and I'll just refresh this and we just inspect element here, you can see that it changes the ID of the HTML element for that section. And we still have the class, and then we still have that 6-digit code there. And as we know, this is loading on our website everywhere else except for our opt-in pages, which means this code is working. So what we can take away from this is that even if you go into Bricks Builder and you add a custom ID up here, Bricks Builder behind the scenes still saves its own 6-digit 6-letter ID. And that's why this is unaffected. This still works because Bricks Builder hasn't overwritten this with our custom ID here. It actually creates 2 of them. So it can still target the element ID here and have this run true. Now, if we didn't want to use this and keep adding things like this where I have to put the 6-letter code that Bricks does and then write a meaningful comment here so I can remember what my code's doing. If we want to make our code a little bit more meaningful and start to target things based on this ID here, we can do that. And to do that, we just need to use this here, which is the element settings CSS ID. So I'm going to copy this from here. Again, it's on my blog post here. And we're going to go back here and I'm just going to comment out this just for now. And we're just going to go ahead and rewrite this using the new method. So I'm just going to get that. I'm going to get rid of that. And I'm going to overwrite that there. So here's the old one, element ID. And here's the new one, element settings CSS ID. So the CSS ID, if we go back to here, we know that when we updated this under the style tab, that became the CSS ID. So if we copy from here and go back to here, we can now update that to that. And now if we click save, we can go back to our opt-in page here. And if I refresh the page, you can see that that's not outputting there. And if we go to the home page and refresh here, that is still outputting there. So this is working now. So that's how you would go and use your own custom ID inside Bricks Builder. It really depends. This is a little bit more meaningful and easier for me to remember. So it's really up to you which one you want to use there, but I just wanted to point that out there to save you a little bit of headache. So I'm going to wrap this up there. Any questions that you guys have, leave them in the comments below. And obviously I can't update this video. So what I'll do is any comments or things that you guys want to know or things that maybe I made a mistake on, I'll update my blog post. So that will be the most up-to-date source of information after this video. So I definitely recommend reading the blog post. And if you're looking for something else to do today, we did touch on some post types here in the video that were in a WooFunnels plugin. If you've never built a sales funnel before, or you have built sales funnels, you're on ClickFunnels and you're looking to use something in WordPress, I have this video here called 2 insane WooCommerce plugins, one of which is WooFunnels. And I just go through how I use it in my businesses and why I like it so much. And you might find that useful. So I'm going to leave that video here. I definitely recommend going and checking that out now. And again, don't forget to read the blog post. I'll see you guys in the next video.